What's going on? It's GameRules.com. My name is Mark, and today I'm going to show you how to play Phase 10 Flip. That's right, they took Uno Flip and they applied it to Phase 10. This is Mattel's other classic game. In this video, I'm going to show you what you get out of the box, how to set up the game, and how to play. First, let's look at what is in the box. So you're going to get your instructions, which ends up being something like a car map from back in the day. Good luck folding this back to the way it was. We've got a double-sided deck, color sides, just like a normal Phase 10 deck, as well as a wild side. And we get more than enough reference cards, one for each player. All right, let's dive in and check out what this game is all about. So, what is the objective of Phase 10? Well, that is to be the first player to complete all 10 phases. Each phase requires a certain number of melds. There are two types of melds, sets and runs. A set is 2 or more cards of the same number, and a run is 2 or more cards in sequential order of the same color. Each color does have a set of wild cards denoted by the star, and these cards can be any number that you need. Once it is played in a set with number cards, the stars become that number. If played in a run, it must match the color of the star, but the star can be whatever number you need to complete that sequence. Each color also has a flip card. When a flip card is played to the discard pile and the draw pile flips, and everybody's hand flips to show the wild side. When you are playing with the wild side, the wild cards are any color you need them to be. And the wild side also has star cards. When you play a wild star, it can be any number and any color that you need to complete the phase. We'll talk more about the different phases here at the end of the video. For now, let's get into game setup and how to play. To set up the game, you're going to shuffle up the deck and you're going to deal out 10 cards to each player. Now, the way you will deal and play in the beginning is that the wild side is the back of the card. So when you deal, you'll deal with the wild side card up. That way, people will only see the wild side. And then once you get your hand, you hold your cards like so, with your opponents only being able to see the wild side of your hand. After you give each player 10 cards, you'll place the rest of the deck face down, meaning wild side up, and you'll turn the top card over with the color side up, beginning the discard pile. If you flip over a flip card to begin the discard pile, you will ignore the flip action. We'll talk about the flip action here in a little bit. And that's all there is to set up. You will have determined who goes first. Typically, you can just play player left of the dealer goes first. For this example, we are going to start with the player at the bottom of the screen. One more thing, you can make sure each player has a reference card. They're going to need these to know which phase they are on and to keep track of their progress. For the first round, each player is trying to complete the first phase. The first phase is composed of two 2-card color runs. Our player here at the bottom of the screen, who is going first, already has half of that phase complete. Because of their yellow wild star, they're able to complete a 2-card color run. So they could do 6-7, 5-6, or 3-4. Either way, they're covered for half of that phase. However, they are unable to create a second 2-card color run. A player's turn will begin with a draw. You can take the top card from the draw pile or the top card from the discard pile. Our player here does not need the 11, so they're going to go ahead and draw from the draw pile. And they got a 10. That does not really help them. After you have drawn, the second step of your turn is to lay down a phase if you have completed one. So here we see the player has not completed a phase yet. They only have half of the phase done. You are only allowed to lay down a completed phase, and it must be the phase that you are on. Once you've completed a phase, you will move on to the next phase in the next round. For now, our first player is unable to lay down a phase. So they'll move on to the next step. The next step is called hitting, and that's when you lay off cards from your hand onto other people's phases that have been played to the table. Nobody has done that yet, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the fourth step. The fourth and final step is to choose a card from your hand and discard it to the discard pile. This will end your turn. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that at the end of the round, anybody who has not emptied their hand will earn points for the cards in their hand. So you might want to think about getting rid of high point value cards as soon as possible. We already have a red 12, so even if I got lucky enough to draw a red 11 or a star or something to use this other red 12, I definitely do not need this one. So I'm going to go ahead and discard it. That ends player 1's turn. Let's go ahead and move on to player 2. All right, we went ahead and switched out player 1's hand for player 2's. Let's go ahead and take their turn. It begins with a draw. As you can see, they already have their phase accomplished. They've got a 1-2 and they've got a 4-5. So now we're just trying to get rid of our cards as fast as possible. Let's go ahead and draw from the top of the stock. They got a 10. So that's pretty cool. Now they've finished the first step of their turn. They drew. The second step is to lay down a phase if you can. And they can. Again, they have the 4-5 and the 10 and 11. They also have the 1-2. So what they're going to do when it's time to lay down the phase from your hand, you put the cards of your choice down. And we're going to go ahead and put the higher scoring cards down. Because although the object of the game is to be the first to complete all 10 phases, it is possible for more than one player to do that. And if that does happen, it's the player with the lowest score that wins the game. So scoring does come into play. Now that they've completed the phase step, they can go on to the next step, which is hitting. A player may only hit once they have laid their phase down to the table. And hitting means laying cards off from your hand onto phases that are already out on the table. You can do that with your own phase or with an opponent's phase. So right now we'd be able to add a red 3, a red 6, a yellow 9, a yellow 12. And we do not have any of those numbers. The only way to hit is to add 2 existing phases. Our player here is unable to add any cards to their existing phase. So they're going to go on to the next step, and that is discarding. Let's go ahead and discard a flip card to see how that works. So they've decided to discard their flip card. That means first we flip the draw pile. So the color side is up. Next, we flip the discard pile. So the wild side is up. And then each player flips their hand so that the wild cards are what they see, and their opponents will see the color side. Until another flip card is played, players will be playing with the wild side of their hand. Discarding ends player 2's turn. Let's move on to player 3. All right, we've moved on to player 3. We'll put player 2's melds right here so we can see them. Their hand is over here. Player 3 is now playing with the wild side of their hand. All of the rules apply. They're still trying to hit that first phase with two card color runs. But now that they are playing with the wild side, that's going to be a lot easier to accomplish. So the turn begins with a draw. And they drew a wild star. That is amazing. They are going to be able to lay down a phase, and they're going to be able to hit. So let's go on to the next step, laying down the phase. So they have, let's see, they have a 5-6. We'll put that down. And they have another 5-6. They actually have a lot of options here. Okay, they've met the requirements for phase 1. Right now, these are wild, so they can still be determined to be any other color by being hit on. Let's move on to the next step for player 3, which is hitting. And they are able to do a lot. So first, they're going to go ahead and hit on their first run here. So actually, they can go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then over here, they're going to be able to go 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, let's make that. 3, 4, 5, 6. And then since we're playing with the wild side up, you are allowed to hit on an opponent's phase with the wild side showing. So our opponent over here has a 4-5 2-card color run played to the table. Well, I can play this wild on that. So I'll go ahead and add it. Now they got 3, 4, 5, leaving player 3 with 1 card. So we are about to see how the round ends. A player ends their turn by discarding. Once a player discards their final card, the round comes to an end. Players will then tally up their score based on how many cards are remaining in their hands. To figure out your score for the round, first, the player who ended the round scores 0 because they've played out all their cards. Let's go on to player 2. Player 2 was unable to play their phase, so they will earn points for all the cards they had in their hand. Now you will score based on which side of the cards is showing. So we're playing with the wild side up when the round came to an end, so those are the cards you score, not the color side. So numbers 1 through 9 are all worth 5 points. And then numbers 10 through 12 are all worth 10 points. Any star cards, whether they are wild or on the color side, are worth 20 points each. So you definitely don't want to be stuck with those in your hand at the end of the round. Also, each player, regardless of whether or not they win out, who completes the phase for the round gets to move on to the next phase. So player 3 ended the round. They completed the first phase. They get to move on to phase 2. But player 2 also completed that first phase. So they will get to move on to the next phase for the next round. However, they still earn positive points for the cards remaining in their hand. Of these 3 players, player 1, the person who did not complete their phase, will still be stuck on phase 1 in the next round. A couple things to keep in mind. As the deck is flipped and players are playing with the color side or the wild side, we will start to see phases on the table get mixed up. So let's say a player has a wild run here down on the table, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we are playing with the color side of the deck. Another player could, for example, hit on this phase by adding a green wild card. So they could say, well, that's a 10. Once a color card is added to a wild phase, the phase becomes that color. So from this point on, only green cards or wild cards can be added to this phase. The same goes for color phases. So here we have a red 6, 7, 8. At this point, only red cards or wild cards can be added. So a player could, for example, hit a wild 9 if we were playing with the wild side cards. And that's how to play phase 10 flip. Now, if you were paying attention, you will have seen that the round I showed ended with a flip card being discarded. Now, the rule book does not say specifically whether or not you would flip your cards in that instance or not. So I say it's up to you. You have to decide before you start playing. If a flip card is played to end the round, does everybody flip their hand? It will affect how cards are scored. Also, there are 2 variations that you can play. If you think the regular game takes too much time, you can speed it up a little bit by doing one of 2 things. First, you can play where you only play 5 phases. So as a group, you decide which 5 phases you're going to play, and then the first to complete all 5 with the lowest score wins the game. The other way to play is where everybody moves along from phase to phase, regardless of whether or not they met that phase. So like in my example, player 1 did not complete the phase. With the traditional rules, they would be stuck on phase 1 until they completed it. This tends to make the game longer. However, if we were to play with this variant rule, we would say that player 1 moves on to phase 2 regardless. This helps speed things up, and it makes it easier to keep track of where everybody is. Because it is possible at some point during the game that everybody will be in a different phase, and it is up to them to keep track of where they're at. If you have any questions about phase 10 flip, or if you have a game you would like to see a tutorial for, let me know down in the comments. I've got playlists for you here that will lead you to many other games that you might be interested in. And of course, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, ring the bell, subscribe to the channel. We have new videos coming out every week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep on playing. Just go back together. Ah.